Hello dear viewers, I hope that you are doing well. Today I am going to narrate the summary of Governing the Ungovernable by Dr. Ishrat Hussain. So first of all, I would like to tell you that who is Dr. Ishrat Hussain. Dr. Ishrat Hussain is a renowned economist and he worked in the World Bank and then he remained the governor of State Bank and he remained the head of institutional reforms team made by Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan. And in this book, Governing the Ungovernable, Dr. Ishrat Hussain tells us that what are the problems that are confronting Pakistan. And he says that the most important problem that is confronting Pakistan is the economic problem. And he says and tells us there are several hypotheses about the economic problem of Pakistan, that it took place or it generated or it took its start from these perspectives. While discussing the economic problems of Pakistan, Dr. Ishrat Hussain looks at the economic problems of Pakistan from a historical perspective, and he divides the history of Pakistan into two phases. The first phase starts from 1947 and ends at 1990. And the second phase starts from 1990 and ends at 2018 when this book was published. And Dr. Ishrat Hussain asserts that from 1947 to 1990, Pakistan was one of the leading economies in the Asia. And when Pakistan got independence, the poverty level was 50%. And from 1947 to 1990, poverty level decreased from 50% to 30%. And Pakistan was one of the leading economies in Asia, and it left behind India, Bangladesh, and even South Korea. In 1960s and 1965, South Korean economists came to Pakistan to learn a 5-year program that was introduced by the government of Ayub Khan. And Pakistan was far ahead of all the Asian countries in 1960 and 1965 until 1990. And the economic growth in Pakistan was 6%, while the economic growth in India and Bangladesh and all the neighboring countries was only 3 to 4%. And then Dr. Ishrat Hussain tells us about the economic decline that took place from 1990s and till 2018. So he mentions that what were the reasons behind the economic growth from 1947 to 1990, and what are the reasons of economic decline from 1990 to 2018. Dr. Ishrat Hussain mentions that from 1947 to 1990, Pakistan achieved economic prosperity and it developed. And he says although there were several shocks and Pakistan economy would have declined, but it flourished. For example, in the very beginning in 1947, there was a huge influx of the migrants who came from India to Pakistan. This was a very uphill task that Pakistan coped very well. And then he mentions that we fought wars with India in 1965 and 1971. Still our economy was improving and it was progressing. And in 1971, half of the Pakistan was separated and it became Bangladesh, but still Pakistan economy flourished. And then he mentions the policy of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto when he introduced nationalism, and it was a devastating blow to industrialization, but still the economy of Pakistan flourished. And then he mentions the Afghan Jihad, that Pakistan held America in Afghan Jihad and Pakistan was helping them. And this was again a shock to our economy, but still economy was flourishing. So these are the few shocks that he mentions, that although there were several shocks to the economy, but it was still flourishing. And then he talks about the second phase that started from 1990 and till 2018. So in this, he sees that there is a decline in the economy of Pakistan, and he looks at several perspectives that what are the reasons behind the decline in Pakistan's economy. First thing that he mentions is this, that he is of the opinion that mostly economists think that terrorism led to economic decline in Pakistan. And he says that this hypothesis can be rejected on the basis of certain arguments that from 2001 till 2008 there was terrorism and Pakistan was the part of war on terror that was started by America, but its economy flourished from 2001 to 2008. So this hypothesis is rejected by Dr. Ishrat Hussain, that it is not the terrorism that is responsible for economic decline, it is something else. The second thing that he mentions is political instability. Dr. Ishrat Hussain says that economists are of the opinion that economic stability and political stability go hand in hand. And in Pakistan, there was no economic stability because there was no political stability. So he says that this is right, that there was no political stability, but there are other reasons that are responsible for the economic decline. It is not the political instability that is responsible for the economic decline of Pakistan. Next thing that he mentions is the lack of governance, and this is one of the most important things that he focuses upon. And he is of the opinion that lack of governance in Pakistan led to the downfall of economy, because there was no governance, as Dr. Shahid Barki in his book says, that Pakistan became the graveyard of the institution and there was no governance. Institutions stopped working and there was no check and balance, and this led to the economic decline in Pakistan. And then in his book, Dr. Ishrat Hussain looks at all the institutions of Pakistan like judiciary and military and economy and bureaucracy. And when he looks at them, he briefly discusses the history of judiciary, military, bureaucracy and other institutions. And he is of the opinion that it is mostly the lack of governance that led to the economic decline in Pakistan. And the most important thing in this book is that he gives some suggestions that these economic problems of Pakistan can be solved if these solutions are worked upon and if they are implemented in our society, so the problem of economic decline can be solved. Ishrat Hussain calls these suggestions as institutional reforms. So the first and foremost suggestion that he gives is related to the election commission. He is of the opinion that election commission must be made an independent institution that must be free to conduct elections independently, and there must be no interference. And he is of the opinion that throughout the history of Pakistan, election commission is not made independent. So when it will be made independent, it will lead to the election of those people that are selected or elected by the people, and they will work for the betterment of the people. Second thing that he mentions is related to the politics, and he is of the opinion that all the political parties in Pakistan, they are dynastic, and one person leads the political party. If he dies or she dies, then the party is led by his or her son or daughter. So it is dynastic. So he is of the opinion that the leaders of the parties must be elected by the members of the party. And first of all, he is of the opinion that if you want democracy to prevail in your society, your political parties must become democratic. Because if there is no democracy inside the political parties, there can not be any kind of democracy in your country. So he suggests that there must be intra-party elections in which the members must be free to choose their leaders instead of selected by the people who are selected by some people are like a dynasty. If one father or mother dies and daughter and son take the place of mother. The next and the most important thing that Dr. Ishrat Hussain mentions is the system of taxation. And we have seen that in Pakistan there is no proper effective system of taxation. He is of the opinion that only the lower classes pay taxes, while the upper and rich and elite classes, they do not pay any kind of tax at all. So he is of the opinion that all the people must be taxed, and we must increase tax net. So in order to increase this tax net and tax collection, he thinks that FBR must be made more powerful and independent and autonomous, so that it can be collecting tax from all the people and throughout the country. Next thing that Dr. Ishrat Hussain mentions is very important, and he is of the opinion that Pakistan must introduce right to know act, because in this way people will consider and they will hold their public representative responsible, and it will start a system of check and balances. And he gives the example of India, that in India this act was introduced in 1992, and this has led to the flourishing of economy, and it has led to reforms in various sectors of the country, because through the right to know and information act, people become the partners in the institutional working, and when they become partners in the institutional working, they tell the government about the drawbacks, flaws and faults and problems in the institution, so it leads to a better economy and better democracy. The last and the important thing that Dr. Ishrat Hussain mentioned is that Pakistan constitution has vested too much powers in the Prime Minister, and he is of the opinion that we do not need to vest too much powers in the Prime Minister, rather we need to give powers to the cabinet. So whatever is decided, it must be the decision of those who are elected by the people, and it must be decided by the majority of the members of the cabinet instead of a single person. So he is of the opinion that when matters and decisions are decided by a single person, it leads to a dictatorship or a single man who is deciding everything. So it must be avoided, and the cabinet must be given importance, and it must be made powerful. So these are few suggestions given by Dr. Ishrat Hussain in his book Governing the Ungovernable, and he says that if these things are worked upon, Pakistan's economy will be standing on its own feet and it will flourish. Thank you.